Hey everybody, it's Mark Fig and welcome back to the Hobbyist Hangout podcast, a podcast about all things hobbies. And I've been wanting to do this for a really long time. The actual original inception idea of this podcast was to have guests on, and I finally bit the bullet and I found the best person to possibly have as my first guest, Jess. You might know her as JashiiCorrin. Am I saying that right? I always feel like I say Joshi or Jashi.
Yeah. I mean, like, technically the way that I say it is JashiiCorrin, but I know that a lot of my American friends say Joshi. I'm like, there's no R in there. What are you doing? But
we put letters on anything.
Yeah.
So Jess and I have been friends for a while. It's funny because I was actually thinking back as I was writing out these questions, and I was like, I feel like we've been friends for a really long time, like internet friends. We actually physically met at in DC when you were here for the planner conference that was going on, which was absolutely amazing. I met like you and I met Erica and like all these other people, and I was like, I feel like I've just known Jess forever, but we actually haven't been like chatty like for a long time. I don't know. I was trying to figure out. So We'll talk about that later on. But for those that might not know you, a quick introduction of yourself, who you are, what you do, why you're on this podcast, and then we'll get into some fun questions about hobbies.
Well, hi, I'm Jess, or JashiiCorrin, or JashiiCorrin, I suppose. But yeah, I am a content creator, YouTuber, primarily based in Wellington, New Zealand, technically from Melbourne, Australia, but like, don't tell the Kiwis because they'll kick me out. Yeah, I was a full-time science teacher at an all-girls school here in Wellington for about like 6.5 years, but I left that midway through last year, so it's kind of like my 1 year anniversary of doing content creating full time now. So it's like kind of exciting. I haven't done anything to celebrate, but like
You're on a podcast to celebrate your 1 year content creator anniversary, and I'm so pleased and happy and just thrilled that you chose me. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. You know, we've been talking, like you said, we've been talking about doing this for quite a while, and we actually kind of managed to have the calendar line up so we could actually do it. So,
well, before we get into any questions and talking more, I've decided that I'm going to try to do something with all of my guests, which is called split decisions. So I just wrote down a bunch of this or that. Some of them are going to be journal related, since obviously that's your realm. Some of them are going to be totally random off the side. But the idea is I'm going to read them off and you're just going to split decision. What comes to mind, this or that? All right, ready?
Do it.
Stickers or stamps?
Stickers.
Pen first or pencil first?
Pencil first.
Okay, good. Dot grid or line grid?
Ooh, dot grid.
Dot grid. TikTok or IG Reels?
IG Reels.
Bullet journal or Bujo?
Ooh, probably bullet journal.
Yeah. Ebooks or real books?
Oh, ebooks.
Ebooks. Likes or comments?
Comments.
Comments. Gel pens or fountain pens?
Oh, fountain pens. Even though I don't have any.
Mac or PC?
PC.
Oh. Travel or staycation?
Ooh, stay travelcation.
Going around the block on a bike is not the same thing.
You would not begin to catch me on a bike, but yeah, okay, we'll staycation.
Dogs or cats?
Turtles.
Turtles, okay.
I don't like fur.
Oh, okay. It's actually when I wrote that, I was like, I don't even know if Jess has pets. I don't think I've ever seen a pet in the background. Ketchup or mustard?
Ooh, ketchup.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Starbucks or boba?
Boba.
Okay. That's all I have for split decisions. Thanks for doing that. Random, the most random start to any type of podcast that we could ever have.
Loved it.
Well, so excited to have you on today. I mean, the big part of this podcast that I wanted to do originally and kind of what I'm doing now is talking about all things hobbies. Now, for you and I, we come from a very big, huge bullet journal content creator space. I was thinking a lot about like when I got started, and I think we actually got started probably around the same time. I started in 2017 in April. You, same year, right?
It was November 4th, 2016.
Okay, so you're a little bit older than I am. That went into it. I definitely want to talk about bullet journaling and planning. I mean, you are the queen of planning. You're the queen of theme is actually the nickname that I gave you. I don't know if anyone's ever called you that before, but you do some amazing things. But, we have all of that to chat about. We will. What I'm curious about is outside of bullet journaling, what are your other hobbies? What other things are you into?
Yeah, that awkward moment where I have like no other hobbies, but it's fine.
Bullet journal is life.
That's it. That's all there is. But I guess outside of bullet journaling, the main thing that I like kind of fill my time with is just like learning about content creating. That in
Mm.
itself is a hobby for me and has now become like a job as well, which, brings in its own issues, but it is still something I really enjoy. And then despite having a book club for like a year and a half now, I haven't really considered myself a reader until
Mhm.
like 2 or 3 months ago. So that's kind of what I've
Mm.
been getting more into. But
Nice. What's your book like theme or area of interest?
So mainly like what I would consider to be my like safe space would be all like personal development, productivity, self-help, that kind of thing. But my good friend Monica, Bibliophile by Night over on Instagram, has kind of like convinced me that I needed to read the A Court of Thorns and Roses series,
Is that the
which
fairy book, right? Like fairy
yes.
something?
But it's so problematic because now I'm like super obsessed. Like, I don't know if you've ever had it where you've been reading a book and you get so kind of like sucked into the world that then you go back to your regular everyday living and you're like, how do I even function? I can't do this right now. I need more book.
Yeah, the only two that I've ever like really read through is like the Harry Potter series and the
Oh,
Hunger Games. And every summer I either read one of those series. So I'm on my Hunger Games series right now, rereading that. And it's funny because like I read it so much you kind of get into it. But my wife is really big into a lot of more of the like rom-com type of books. She like just kills through books all the time. And I'm just stick to what I know. I'm like, I don't know if I want to read anything else. Like, I don't know if I'll find anything else as much as I love that. Or like Ready Player One, a lot of my stuff is in that spot. But I definitely do not consider myself a reader at all.
I can completely understand just like rereading things that are like the safe place. You're like, no, I know this one. I know it's enjoyable. It has a
Yep.
predictable outcome because I know the outcome. So like, let's just do more of that.
Yep.
It's like
That's exactly
me
it.
rewatching Gossip Girl for the seventh time.
And there is nothing wrong with that. That is a fantastic series. It's funny you talk about content creation and like kind of consuming that as a hobby because that's definitely my background, right? I have a full-time job and this is definitely a hobby, which also, like you said, turned into another full-time job to an extent, but it's more of like a fun way to kind of do that. And I'm curious for you, right? You've turned a hobby into a full-time career, right? In this 1 year anniversary of this. Have you found anything that I guess let's talk about the good because I'm always the positive Patty in the room. Like, what have you really enjoyed about taking something from like a hobby into like a full time job? Like, what have you gotten the most enjoyment out of by doing that?
Yeah, no, fair. Good question. Love starting with the positive. All about that.
Yeah, because we're going real dark in a little bit. Don't you
Yeah,
worry.
that's all right. We'll get to that. Like, I came in all black for a reason, guys. But no, I think that like whenever you start putting things out on the internet, you know this. There's always that kind of like tentative like will I be accepted kind of a thing, which let's just park that backseat. There's always a community for everything. Like
Mhm.
everybody's a nerd in some way. So for me it's very much been about like connecting with people that share common interests, connecting with people not only like in the kind of journaling space but then also in the kind of personal development space because it's kind of led into that.
Mhm.
um, Connecting with people who struggle with focus as much as I do. Like,
Mhm.
and having so many different bits and pieces that they're kind of really enthused about, but then they'll get really into it and then fall away with it in a couple of weeks, and then kind of realizing like, do I have ADHD? Like, it's been a really kind of interesting journey of kind of starting with just sharing something that you enjoy, but then
Mhm.
allowing it to kind of morph into this kind of community building and getting to kind of have more insights about yourself and others as people. I think that
Mhm.
that's been really cool.
And then what about like the what you've kind of not liked about it, going from a full time job into that? Because people always ask me too. I think it's like the thing when you start to grow and become bigger, which is funny because I still like I don't feel like I'm there versus like some other of our friends that have like a lot. Like what did you just hit 50,000 on
Yeah.
YouTube, which is like amazing to me. And then what are you at in Instagram? You're up there too, right?
I think we got to the point where my YouTube surpassed my Instagram, which was a big thing. Like, oh my gosh, this has been a long time in the making. But yeah, so we're about 50, 52-ish on YouTube, and I think about 45-ish on Instagram at the
Yeah.
moment. Which, like, if you, I don't know, have you ever been to a concert with 45,000 people? Because it's literally insane.
It
Like, I
is.
was
Well, we always think about that. I know we talk a lot about that. So, on top of just being Instagram friends, we're also part of this YouTube mastermind. Again, like-minded people coming together and talking. And we talk a lot about like viewers, and we talk a lot about views and likes and things like that, and followers, both on YouTube but other places too. And that's something I feel like you always hear, especially when you are kind of consuming this other content, right? It's not necessarily like you see, oh, my video didn't do great. 1,000 people watched it, but fill a room with 1,000 people that consumed your content or that follow you or subscribe. It's pretty amazing. So it's fantastic and amazing even to be like, 10,000 people, 20,000 people,
yeah.
45,000 people. Like, it's awesome.
I also like I love looking back through my journal and looking at the kind of like celebration of the milestones. I remember when
Yeah.
I hit like 300 Instagram followers, and I was like, I need to host a giveaway. Like, it was so sweet. I think I gave away like a pack of 12 Muji pins or something like that. But I was like, oh my god, 300 people.
It's
Yeah,
an
I
amazing giveaway.
hope somebody enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
sure someone did. And they're like, now I'm
yeah,
addicted to stationery. Thank you, Jess.
you're welcome.
So inside of the creative space, like I said, I've nicknamed you the queen of theme. You have amazing themes. You put amazing content on Instagram, and YouTube is fantastic. Have you always been a creative, or can you remember kind of the earliest time when you started to kind of express that creativity in your life?
Alrighty, we're gonna do like way throwback here.
Yeah, yeah, all the
And
way
like
back.
the only reason that I know this is because of the like product that came out of it. Product,
Okay.
very official. It was a tea towel. Let's calm down.
Okay.
But back when I was in like kindergarten, we all got to draw a picture for this tea towel that they were making, like a class tea towel. We had to draw a picture of ourselves, and oh my god, it looked like a potato. Like, I'm not even
I
kidding.
love little kid potato people. I think it is the most amazing, cutest thing ever.
I know, right? And you look at some of them and you're like, wow, look at you. Like, you drew out the hand and the fingers and everything. Mine's just literally a blob with a line through it, which I think was supposed to be my hair, and
Okay.
then two sticks for arms. And I'm like, exquisite. Perfect. No.
Picasso.
But yeah, no, I think that I've always been into creativity, but I never really considered it to be something that I would pursue as like a job.
Hmm.
So if we're thinking kind of like high school age or whatever, I stopped doing art around year 10, which I'm not too sure how that translates for other places. About like what, 13, 12, 11, 10, maybe like 4 years before the end of high school is when I
Okay.
kind of stepped out of doing art as one of my subjects,
Oh, interesting.
because I was like, no, we're going to go to science and languages and all of that kind of thing instead. Um, but I would still fill my time with other creative pursuits. So like I did jewelry making and
Hmm.
scrapbooking and card making, a bunch of other crap that I didn't stick with. Like, bullet journaling's the only one that's stuck.
Isn't that amazing? I talk about that all the time on this podcast where you talk about all the different hobbies that you have and things that you get into, and you get all into it. You buy all the supplies, you do it, and then you just like turn and you're like, ooh, new shiny thing. And you go and do that. But bullet journaling has stuck around. I think it's, for me, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. I always think about that because it can form into what you need it to be, right? If you want it to be an art journal, if you want it to be something else like that, it can be. If you need it to be productive, minimalist, kind of whatever that theme kind of is, it can be that for you. And it tracks kind of to your life, which I think is helpful. And you're like, okay, I've gone too far, pull it back, focus here. Okay, I want to do something a bit more. Why do you think that you stuck to it as long as you have? Like you said, it's been what, that's 7 years for you, because I think it's 6 for me, right? Like,
Yeah.
what keeps you coming back and like be like using one along with creating the content? Like, you are a bullet journal user. You're not just creating these to put on your shelf. You're actually
Yeah.
using them. What keeps bringing you back?
I think it's probably like you said, is that idea that it can morph into what you need it to be. So it's like if I'm not feeling super creative, there are ways around that. Like we can
Mm,
do washi, we can do printables, all of that kind of thing. So it's that way of kind of like maintaining the habit, I guess you say.
hmm.
But then also the fact that it's multifaceted, like it's not just a creative outlet for me. It's literally how I organize my life. So like
Yep.
oh my gosh, which always needs help. So I'm like, because that has become like such a core part of my productivity system in general, it's like, even if I'm not being creative with it, I still have that stuff to fall back on, which still
Mm,
reinforces the habit of using it. And
yep.
then the creativity comes when I can be bothered, which is most of the time, but sometimes not so much.
Yeah. So what brought you to the point of moving into bullet journaling? What was the catalyst that started that for you?
So, any of my teacher friends out there, you guys know how busy, hectic, crazy just teacher life can be.
Hmm.
So, I was getting to the end of my first year of teaching, and I was coming very quickly to realize, yeah, hey, maybe my Google list just isn't working. Like, I needed something just more robust to help me keep all of my stuff together.
Mm,
Various classes with what I needed to do for those, and then other teaching admin, and then just life in general. So that was kind of part of what drew me to it. Also, just the fact that I think that that was when it was kind of starting to ramp up on Tumblr. Like, it's been a hot minute since I used
I was to
Tumblr,
say,
but
whoa, is Tumblr even
yeah,
still around?
I don't think I even have a Tumblr account still. And if I do not want to look at it because it's probably cringe as heck. Ugh. But yeah, so it was kind of like that marrying of the idea of like I have so much stuff in my life that I need to organize, and this simple list just isn't working for me, so I need a different system. And
Hmm.
also by that point, I'd kind of let all of my creativity, kind of like creative hobbies, slide a bit
Hmm.
because again, teaching, busy, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like best of both worlds.
Yeah, it worked out. So what came first when it came to your content creation? So did you start your YouTube or your Instagram or kind of posting about it before, but like when you started or after you started? Like at what point were you like, okay, I'm bullet journaling for me. I have a crazy schedule, work, I need this. Hey, I'm going to start sharing this with other people on the internet.
Oh, we love to bite off more than we can chew and then chew it.
Right? Yeah, that's what we
Yes.
do. Let's start a podcast.
I don't know. Let's do it. And a newsletter and a course and oh my gosh, calm down. But no, the thing that actually was first, which is no longer with us, Requiescat and Pace, is a blog. Which
Hmm.
like choices. I don't like writing. Like, why did I think this was a good idea? But it's fine. I know, right?
Well, people read
But
it. I mean, it's funny because like I have a website and a blog too, and I was like, I'm not going to write long form content. Does anyone even read long form content? But people do. Like people still are reading.
so I first started by trying to write a blog because I'm like, I've got these ideas that I want to share. Like, I want to be in depth about it and give people good detail. So I was like, oh,
Hmm.
I'll write a blog. That's probably the easiest way to go about it. And I think I wrote all about 2 posts. And that was the end of that. Which, of course, I'm me. So anytime I like to get into a new hobby, I'm like, okay, go buy all the supplies, rah, rah, rah. Like, get the website, get the domain, all of this. There's a lot of money to spend for 2 blog posts. But it's fine. But then I think that would have been 2018, like the start of 2018, maybe,
Okay.
um, or possibly the start of 2017. I don't know, 2018. We'll say that. And then considering that didn't really take off, it wasn't until about October, I think, of 2018 where I started getting into Instagram instead. I'm like, I still
Okay.
want to share ideas. I still have these creative things that I want to, show and share with people. But I need something that's just like way lower in terms of the bar. Like it needs to be so much easier. I'm like, okay, we can snap a picture and put it on Instagram with a short caption. Like we
Mhm.
can do that. So that's why my Instagram got a fair bit bigger than my YouTube had been because I
Mhm.
started that like a year and a half ish before I started my YouTube.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha. I think that's a natural progression for a lot of people. It was the same thing for me as well. It's like you have the Instagram you're doing, and then suddenly, okay, am I ready to go from static photo to recording and kind of doing all these different things inside of here? So it seems like a good progression, which is
yeah.
pretty amazing. So when you came into Instagram, because I'm trying to think of the time, so we're kind of at the same exact time, we're coming in. Like, who were the big people that you were like inspiring you? I'm curious if we have any cross paths. I feel like we will because there were like some mega huge bullet journalers in like the height of bullet journaling, which I do think was like 2017, 2018,
Yeah.
2019, and then I feel like it's starting to kind of like dwindle. We'll talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit, but like who are the big names that really were like inspiring you early on when you were getting into bullet journaling and Instagram?
So like if you go and have a look at my old layouts, you will very much see the boho berry inspiration.
Yep.
Like it
Okay.
is very present. The boho berry was definitely the biggest.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was like the biggest name I feel like in bullet journaling at the time.
For a good long while too. Like she was kind of like uh, yeah, like you said, the biggest name in bullet journaling. And so I think that, you know, her sharing her content was like, oh, I could do that. Like I could share those kind of things. Um, it wasn't until a little bit later that I actually got onto YouTube and was sharing things, and that was a different creator that inspired that. But
Hmm.
also I think like Tiny Ray of Sunshine
Hmm.
possibly at the
She
time
was
was
another big one
getting a
too.
bit bigger. Yeah. And we had Sunshine and Stationery. So she was a bit more minimal and she shared, because she was a teacher as well. So she shared
Oh.
things that I could kind of like, you know, relate to a bit more in terms of that. But in terms
Mhm.
of like creativity and the kind of creative aspect of stuff, the inspiration was very much Boho Berry.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It's funny because anyone who's like on YouTube and you saw like the beauty community drama that happens and all of that. It felt like kind of the same thing, but for like planning and bullet journaling because I felt
Yeah.
like it was like all of a sudden things were happening. Everyone was talking about it. There was a lot that happened during that time. And I was just talking about this in a Q&A. Someone had asked me about like, why did you pick Men Who Bullet? And I remember talking about not wanting to use the term bullet journal in my name because at that point there was a lot of stuff that was going on. And I feel like there was some of that. And so I guess what I'm going to get into now is like a little bit of the drama of the bullet journal community to a certain extent, because um, I've been a fan of you for a long time. It's funny because as you got ginormous in your subscribers and everything, I was like, early on when I started, for all of those people that skyrocketed, I was like celebrity status for them, right? Like I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I always tell Nicole, it was Plans That Blossom, that I remember being in Target and her liking a photo of mine. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've made it. Like this thing's happening. So I was scared to like talk to these people or reach out to these people and all that. And I felt like it was you and a number of others that were like just doing amazing. And I was like, I'm this little baby account. And then like it started to kind of come together a little bit of like, oh, let's be in these what were the groups called? Were you in the group? I'm trying to think if you started in there too. The
Eggplant.
interaction groups or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it
The
evolved into
engagement
that
cards?
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like this idea of like getting engagement and post and liking things and doing all of that. And I remember like getting the invite to that group, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like some humongous accounts. Like Haley was in there, and Nicola was in there, right, from hers originally, and like other people. It's
Yeah.
just kind of insane. But that morphed into like what is now this ridiculous chat group that we have, which I appreciate
Yeah.
so much more. And I think that's when we went from like very professional to like getting to know people in the community. Did you have any of those interactions, I guess, as you were up and coming, or anyone that you were kind of like starstruck by, or as you started to move from just like creating your own content to becoming a bigger part of this community, which you are? It's your community is amazing. Just everything that I see like behind the scenes and what you have going on. But like before that became what it is now, like did you have any of those moments of like starting to get to meet people or engage with the community that you're just like, this is kind of crazy, and now you're like, that's kind of silly that I felt that way?
I'm like still that way. Like anytime somebody who's even like close to my amount or higher is just I like, oh my gosh, senpai noticed me, like, kind of thing. But I think yeah, very much like you said, like anytime the official bullet journal account would like one of my posts, I'm just like, oh my god, I've made it. Like
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, you're sitting there on like 1,000 subs or whatever, and you're just like, oh my god, this is what fame feels like.
I know.
Paparazzi, please.
I can barely go out of my house right now. Bullet
I
journal
know,
liked it.
right? What? No, one of the moments though. This is kind of an aside, but one of the moments that felt like a little bit of a win was I was walking down the corridor like in my school,
Hmm.
and one of the girls from the junior school, because I'm a senior science teacher, she walked past and she kind of gave me this inquisitive look, and I'm just like, "Are you lost? Like, is there something I can help with?" She's like, "My mum watches a lady on YouTube that looks just like you."
You're
I'm
like
just
a
like, "Oh,
lady.
really?"
I am a
Yeah,
young woman.
I know, right? It was quite sweet though. I'm just like, oh, really? Does she? She's like, yeah, she does. She does books, and I'm like, okay, cool, books. Yeah, it's probably me. Like, or the fact that Monica, who I mentioned before, I think it was her niece that went to my school as well. And this was like before I actually knew Monica. And her niece came up to me in the corridor and was like, "My auntie watches your journal videos religiously. She loves you." And I'm just like,
Oh, that's amazing. Local celebrity.
I know, right? It's very sweet though. It's nice to hear that people appreciate it
Yeah,
effectively.
absolutely.
Um, but yeah, whenever you have somebody who's like at a level that you just don't consider yourself to be on, and they like, give you the heart or the like or the thumbs up or whatever, or if they comment, oh my god,
Yeah.
they took the time out of their day to write me something. Like, it's yeah, it still gets me though. Like if I get anything like that from anybody who's like around the same subs as me or higher, I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's
Thank
pretty cool. So I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but going into that, but you mentioned like when the bullet journal account liked your stuff or kind of done that, right? This is, I think, probably the biggest like controversy in the bullet journal community, right? Is this idea of like overly decorative bullet journals that are not functional or finding that mix inside of there. There's definitely been a roller coaster in the community as we've watched it too, from like how you get started to where you are to budding off or until like fighting off the purists, not biting them, fighting them off,
you.
right? Of like, that's not how you bullet journal, you do it like this. And through there, how has your style changed? And I guess in your feeling on that, right? When like the official bullet journal account and like writer is saying, if it's decorative, it's not bullet journaling, and then all of a sudden sharing other creators that have more decorative, not kind of traditional bullet journaling stuff and making that switch. Like, what has been your experience kind of with that ups and downs of that? And how has that affected what you're doing in kind of like your bullet journal and content creation, even right as a hobby?
Yeah, no, I from the start I always kind of very much felt, and I still feel this way, that like productivity and decoration, like they're not on the same spectrum. So you can be decorative and you can be functional, or you can be minimal
Mm-hmm.
and you can be functional, or you could be minimal and you don't have any plans in there, so it's not functional at all, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I always like, yeah, I know, right? Like, oh, my beautiful layout, it has 2 lines on it. Look at my productivity. No, anyways. But yeah, so I always kind of felt like anytime there was this kind of like pitting people against each other in terms of like form versus function,
Mm-hmm.
effectively, it felt like you're comparing completely different things. Like, why? It's like comparing a lamppost with an orange. Completely different functions. But anyways, so that one always kind of got me as like a bit of a weird point. And I do remember there was one, I think it was a post that the bullet journal account put out, and it was something to the effect of like form trumps function, or other way around, function trumps form, rah rah. And I know what you were trying to say, but you're literally just adding fuel to the fire of people effectively shitting on these creators that are creating really beautiful artworks in their planner. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
to say that they're not functional for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we have what, Isabel Hoops, yeah, Sousa. She does amazing artwork. She's an art teacher. Of course,
She.
she's going to do amazing artwork. They're beautiful, and that's probably a really important creative outlet for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that having a creative outlet is a productivity thing. It is a productivity hack. Like, we don't need to have these kind of like this dichotomy of againstness, but
Yep.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that it's been nice though to see that I feel the bullet journal account and the bullet journal brand has kind of come around on that, because
Yes.
now I feel like their messaging is very much more like, if your decoration in your planner is going to add to your planning experience, is going to make you use it, then more power to you. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that is the messaging we should have started with. Thank you.
Yeah.
Like,
It was
so
very limiting and kind of really, it took a lot of people who I feel like made bullet journaling known, especially beyond just kind of the purist, I like to call them. But now I just like, I'm kind of one of them too, but like, I'm not going to yell at you if you do. And I think that was the big thing. Like, we still get a lot of those type of like comments, not as much as I used to on YouTube. I don't know about
yeah.
you, but like, I don't get as many as I used to. But like, there was just a time where it was just like, if it doesn't look like this, it's not bullet journaling. And I
Yeah.
remember myself thinking, well, if my bullet journal only looked like that, I'm not sharing that on Instagram. who the hell would just want to see a bunch of dots and dashes and my to do? Yes, a lot of people would actually read those. I know they would. They do read them because people are like, "Oh, what are you doing on Thursday? What doctor's appointment are you going to? What? I thought I blurred that out." But like that just wouldn't be interesting, And there's a level of trying to both inspire and show kind of what you're doing and kind of share your approach to it to go through. But I did feel like it was very much early on, like shunning an entire community of people who literally, in my perspective, really kind of made it what it is. But then I think it went a little bit too far. And that's, of course, what people grab onto. Every article that was written about it, about bullet journaling, everything else. It was a video popped up on YouTube today that popped up of somebody who was getting started. And it was just like, don't do this. It should look like this, like exactly form over function. And even recently you have your YouTube series that you're doing right now with like the bullet journal basics. And I was watching it and you talk about that as well. I guess, how do you take that and how are you saying, okay, start with the basics. It should be focused on here, what you're doing. And then we go to your Instagram and you have these thematic, beautiful pieces that people are going through. I guess, how are you translating that and saying, like, it's functional, I am following the method, but then here's my twist on it?
Yeah, no, I always try to be very careful with the way that I word things. Especially when it comes to like recommended advice for beginners and stuff like that. Because I know that a lot of people preach the message of, if you're going to start bullet journaling, then start with the original system, do that for 2 months, don't add anything else.
Yep.
And I kind of take an opposite approach because I know that if it hadn't been decorative and if it hadn't been aesthetically pleasing, I wouldn't have done it. Like, I would have gotten so flippin' bored just writing dot task, like, for pages upon pages.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I have a bit more of that in my journal because it's just more what I need. But I know that that wouldn't have helped me stick with the method. So I take more of an approach of like, rah-rah, do all the things, but come at it with a lens of like kind of self-compassion and forgiveness. So if you want to make 50 layouts in your first journal, heck yeah, go for it. More power to you. But if you know that that's going to get you overwhelmed and then you're not going to use it, then don't do that, right? It's like kind of giving yourself the opportunity to be a learner and figure out what is actually going to work for you, but kind of having enough consideration to start with to know what is going to turn you off from the system. That kind of makes sense.
Is that a learned thing that you feel like that has come to you? Like early on, did you have that mentality, or is that something that you have discovered both about how you plan on yourself, 50,000 subscribers later on YouTube, and on Instagram, and 7 years later from where you started?
I think that it's probably more from my teaching background.
Okay.
Yeah, because one of kind of like the like soft mantras, I suppose, in our classroom is the idea of like, it's okay to be a learner. Like, it's okay to find things hard and it's okay to struggle because that's how we grow. So similar idea with bullet journaling. I'm like, if you're just starting out with bullet journaling or like any new creative pursuit or skill, there's going to be a time where you suck. Like, not... Unless you're a prodigy, like, more power to you in that. But most people, when they start out with a new skill, they suck. Like, we have to give it a bit of time before we kind of find our groove and our rhythm with things.
Yeah.
And a similar idea with, like, setting up your layouts. I've gone through, I think I had at least 12 months of habit trackers before I actually found one that I could stick with.
It's all about experimentation. It really is.
Yeah. It's that thing. Like, if you give yourself enough kind of like self-compassion to say like, hey, it didn't work this month, but that doesn't mean that it's never going to work. It might just mean that I haven't found the right time for me, or I haven't found the right style for me. And like, that's okay.
Yeah.
I know that it becomes a little bit more tricky when you're using equipment that is a little bit more pricey. You don't necessarily want to, go through 12 months of trial and figure yourself out that way. But,
it is what it is, I kind of figure it out. I mean, it definitely comes into it. We talk a lot about, starting off like just using a regular notebook or whatever it might be. Like, don't go buy all the pens or like all of the things like that, right? That you kind of need. You can start basic and kind of build your way up. I think it's a really great way. I love doing flip throughs. I love watching your flip throughs too, of actual like used notebooks, not just like pretty spreads. You're like, great, beautiful, but you didn't actually use it. But going back through and like finding the ones that didn't work. I remember my very first bullet journal. I remember sitting down and I was like, I have to make these pages. Like everyone has these bullet journal collections of things, and it was like all the movies that were coming out for the year, and I go through it, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I was like, I spent a lot of time setting that up and researching it and figuring it out to write it down in a notebook. And there's other things like that, trackers and stuff like too. You've tried them out, you see what doesn't work, you don't use them, but you feel like you have to because you see other people doing it. And then at some point, I don't know what it is, you hit this aha moment. If you stick with bullet journaling, I feel like, because a lot of people give up, where you go, I don't need to do that. I don't need to keep a monthly tracker of how many times. My favorite one I saw on Instagram is a poop tracker. First of all, you do not need to share that on the internet, right? Like, keep that to yourself. But like, eventually, I mean, I guess maybe if you that's something you need to track, I don't know, but like, I don't need to do that, so I'm not going to do that. I don't feel it necessary, right? But like water trackers and sleep trackers and exercise and all these other different things, it's like you put them in there because you feel like you have to. You don't use them, and then suddenly you're like, I don't have to use them. Like, I can just do what I need to do with it, and figure it out, and go through with it. And you start to like just do that, and your bullet journal becomes more minimalist than ever before. You're like, screw trackers. I don't need to track anything. I'm just going to write down notes and tasks.
I also think that, like, you could even think of it as like the opposite is true as well. Like, we have this tendency to kind of lean into more of the layouts that we see more commonly. So it's like, oh yeah, I'll make the movies list and I'll make the TBR and I'll put in a water tracker, even though my water bottle's sitting there just like,
it's been there for 3 days.
The person who's got their poop tracker or whatever, like, sure, it's not something I need, but it's like, if that is something that you need, I do think that there's a lot of value in having somebody share that they set one up, because it almost gives people permission to set their own up, not that you need permission, okay? Not that you need permission for anything in your journal.
Get out your scissors. You had those scissors in your hand before, and it was very powerful.
But yeah, it's like I had 1 month that I set up a Coke Zero tracker, and I only needed it for the 1 month because I was curious, like, how much Coke Zero are you actually consuming? Like, should we be concerned? Spoiler, probably, but I don't care.
Yeah.
So,
like it was a data point. I figured it out, and I'm still drinking 7 a day.
Exactly. It's like I have the data now to show that yes, I probably do drink too much, but I'm going to continue to do that because I like it.
Yeah.
But I got one comment on a tracker that I posted actually, and this was right around the time of like lockdown.
Okay.
And somebody commented saying like, "Ew, gross. Why isn't she brushing her teeth?" And I'm just like, cool, so happy for you that you're a perfect person and you don't struggle with any of these kind of like executive functioning things, but people do struggle. And it's okay if we need to put that kind of stuff on our habit tracker. Because for me, my trigger for brushing my teeth is leaving my house. And I wasn't leaving my house. So I wasn't going to be brushing my teeth. It just didn't happen. Like, yeah, so it's kind of like, I value people sharing trackers that are outside of the norm, in that kind of whole, like, giving permission for other people to do it. You don't need permission, but yeah, can also understand kind of like that borderline of like, where does it get to TMI? Like, maybe I don't need to see the specifics of your sex tracker. Maybe you could show me before the pen.
Yeah. Have you seen a sex tracker in your Instagram escapades?
Not in any of my recommendations through Instagram, but in the Facebook groups and stuff like that where people share layouts. We've got things like the sex trackers, the poop trackers, people tracking like, symptoms are a big one that people ask for a lot. And because symptoms are so varied, you get some very interesting things through there. But I think was it Miss McKenna's Life Leverage? She used to do a relationship tracker, and as part of that, there was a sex tracker on it.
Okay, nice. So as you've gone through and you've created a lot of content, you have so much out there. It's amazing. I like to ask this question because I think it's a little bit humbling sometimes when you like think back. It also is like a trigger. So YouTube, Instagram, there's always going to be haters. We talk about all levels of that. Is there a comment that you have ever gotten on a YouTube video or an Instagram that cut a little deep, but also at the same time was like absolutely ridiculous, but you still remember it?
Yeah. So two come to mind. One of
Okay.
them was like from a way back ago. And I think it was when I was kind of still doing vlogs on my main channel. And somebody commented saying, you need to do something about your skin immediately, kind of a thing. Like, you need to do something there. And I'm just like, hey, sorry, that's just my face. Uh, cool. If you haven't noticed, I'm very red. It's kind of a natural complexion thing that I've got going.
Mhm.
Constant rosiness.
Yeah.
Slightly looks a little drunk. Promise I'm not. But that was kind of like, okay, cool. Didn't need that, but thanks. But one of the ones that did cut, like that one didn't cut so deep. It was kind of just like, okay, hating on for no reason, but whatever.
Yeah.
One that did cut deep though is a comment that I got last year actually,
Okay.
and it was towards the end of the year during our kind of like Vlogmas wrap up, you know, December content stuff. And I was sharing my partner, his name is Vaughn, I call him Vogel, but we
Hmm.
were sharing his flip through of his journal. And, you know, for a myriad of reasons, things weren't fully filled in. Like, you know, it's just what happens. I don't set it up so that, like, with the expectation that he's going to fill in every single page.
Hmm.
I set it up because I enjoy the creative outlet. It was kind of a gift to him. He can use it to organize himself however he wants, all of that. But the comment that I got back was something along the lines of, he seems like a really boring person. And I didn't even know what to do with that. I was like, okay, we're gonna respond in a way that isn't just like tear a bish down, but
Yeah.
because I'm like,
Well.
I'll get the scissors out. But so I commented back saying, I don't know whether you intended it, but this came off quite rude.
Mm.
So that was kind of how I was planning on tackling it. And they responded back saying, like, he barely used any of the pages and his handwriting is horrible, rah, rah, rah. And I'm just like, okay, so sorry that the sun shines out of your butt, delete block.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things that, like, I don't really mind so much. Like, it's not nice, but I don't mind so much when people have something to say about me. Like, you know, it is what it is. I'm putting myself out on the internet. Like, I understand that that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
But it's like, what the heck did he do? Like, girl, he ain't coming for you. He's not
Yeah.
like, you know, standing outside your house being a nuisance. You don't need to come into my space and say these nasty things.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there, people who just say those things, and you are just like, okay, you know, there's kind of two. I think some of it's like insecurities. I have kind of two that do the same thing to me. So one's an insecurity, and one is just like so crazy out there. And it was early on, and it really did like cut deep. But one was like, I can't watch your videos because you bite your nails, and that's disgusting. And I've always been self-conscious of that, and so I always am like, sometimes I watch them like, oh god, but like it's hard to like do a flip through or to design a page or whatever. It's your hands, right? Like, it is what it is. And I was like, oh, super self-conscious, maybe I won't create videos anymore. I can't stop doing it because I've been doing it since I've been 7 years old. I've tried it. But the other one was a funny one, but it was an early YouTube for me. And the person said, I'd rather chew marbles and crap glass and bleed from my anus than do what you did in that bullet journal.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And like, did I waste did I waste time on this? Like, what should I do? I didn't know what to do, and I was just like so blown away by it. But I will never forget it because it pops up in my time hop every year, because it was like 7 years ago today someone said they'd rather poop glass than watch you do what you do. And I was like, oh god.
I wonder if they're still watching. I wonder if they're still like hate watching. Anytime you get a dislike on a video, just think that it's them.
Yeah, and I hope the Desitin is keeping things, you know, safe and secure down there, you know, like it is what it is. But it's definitely like those things happen as you go through. It's just, you're right. It's a part of going out there and putting things out there, but it is something like, it's just your craft. It's what you love. Like you said, it's a hobby. It's now turned into a career. And if someone's like hating on that, you take it personally, you know, you're like, I'm putting a lot of time into this. I'm recording this, editing this, like doing all the things. And then essentially you're saying to me, like, I'd rather injure myself than like do what you did. And you're like, oh gosh, I felt like that was pretty easy, but okay.
Well, like, this guy needs to get his priorities sorted, but that's okay. Well, I had one person come on and comment on we did a 12-hour live stream last year at the end of the year to set up a journal. And so we were setting up like a full 6 months. We're doing all of the, start of journal pages and all of the monthly setups and all of that, and leaving space for our giveaway winner to populate it with their own stuff. And somebody came onto this video saying like, I can't believe it took you 12 hours to set this up. Like it only took me 5 minutes. And I'm like, then why did you click on this video? Like, it says it in the title that it's a 12-hour setup. It says it in the little time card that it's a 12-hour setup.
Yeah.
You didn't have to come here and say that. So I'm also kind of like, wow, how sucky must your life be that you took time out of your day to come and comment that on this video? Like,
yeah, it's one of those things too where you're like, well, I know I'm doing this for a good reason, and I have a thing, and you want to like fight back or argue back, and then you just realize you can't change certain people's minds about it. But you're right, like the person obviously came in there just to be able to say, this took you 12 hours, like that's ridiculous. I mean, I hear that and I'm like, holy crap, that's a long time. First, a long time to stream. God bless for like doing that. Hopefully you had snacks. But just to go through that, like no one thinks also about the fact that like you took that time to do that. You know, I don't know that everyone was hanging on for 12 hours necessarily, probably popping in and out, but at the end you had some great content. People can go back to that video and watch it. It's one of those things. There's so much that kind of goes into it. I wanted to ask you a few final questions because I think some things are definitely amazing that are going on in your space. Again, as I've gotten to know you more over the past, 2 years? I don't know. I feel like maybe that's it. COVID really messed me up because I lost that whole time, I was like trying to think about all the stuff we were like interacting with, and finally we're just like, we are amazing people. We should definitely be doing more stuff together, right? And hanging out more. Exactly. Your community, I was mentioning this earlier, it's amazing and it's grown. I feel like as I'm coming in much later than when you started it, right? I'm seeing your Discord, which is amazing. And you have your troops that like yell at me for posting things in the wrong channel. You have a lot of these different, do you still have a Patreon? Do you still do that as well?
Yep.
Yeah, that, right. You have your streams and kind of all these things that are going on. What did that look like in the beginning, right? Because kind of what you're talking about, did that happen like when you decided to go from content creation as a hobby into doing it as a full-time job? Or were you also managing that while having your full-time job? And what did that look like early on versus the metropolis that it is now?
Metropolis. I'm like, oh, excellent. So yeah, it was very much a gradual thing. It did start before I got kind of full-time into content creating, but since then I've been able to focus on it a lot more and build it out a bit more. So I think that the one that I possibly started with from memory was either Patreon or a Facebook group. It was one of the two. I'm not too sure which one. I know that when I started my Patreon, it was like one tier. It was $1 a month, and you got like a couple of printables or something like that, and a little kind of calendar or schedule of what my releases were going to be for the month. It was very kind of low key. Mm-hmm. And the only reason that I actually set it up to start with is because I didn't have anywhere to share a free printable that I'd made. And Patreon wouldn't let me share things for free without having one tier.
Gotcha. So your website and blog wasn't a good place for that?
Yeah, my beautiful blog. We don't talk about the blog. The Patreon, it was literally only started because I needed to have one paid tier to share free stuff. And then that kind of over a couple of months developed because I was thinking like, okay, we've actually had people sign up for the tier even though it wasn't really like supposed to be a thing. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's going to be other things that people would be interested in. So I went and did a whole bunch of snooping around and figuring out what it was that I could offer through there. And I think around the same time as when I had made the Facebook group, but it was just sitting there being a group. Like I'm pretty sure it was me, my best friend, another friend, and then some random person who joined because it jumped up on their timeline saying, just join a group.
You blast that out. You invited every friend, neighbor, and person that you knew. They're like, please stop. I don't want to be a part of this.
Like, I don't want to be part of your group. Please leave me alone. But the Discord, I can't quite remember when we started that, but it was more recent. I think it was around the time that I had kind of finalized my Patreon tiers because I wanted a space for those people to chat effectively. But I didn't want it necessarily to be just for them. It was open to everyone, like it still is. But if you were part of the patron team, then you got like a colored name. So it's kind of like one of their perks.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's that's kind of like slow development thing, but now that I'm doing content creating full time, I've had a bit more of an opportunity to build it out and get my mod team that yells at people like Mark posting things in the wrong places.
It was a video of you. It was my recreation of your spread. It felt like the right place.
No, that's fair. I was very sweet seeing them put it in the actions log because the moderator team has a little actions log, and I'm just like,
You're very
ooh, Mark got
professional.
told off.
I've been scared to post everything or anything ever since. I'm like, I don't want to do it wrong. No, I think it's amazing that you've gone through it. I'm very curious because even though we've talked about it, you've shared it with us in the mastermind group and other things like this. I think a lot of people that only see what you're posting, right? Like I've seen your Excel spreadsheets and your bullet journals and all of your things, and they're incredibly impressive. Going from something like a bullet journal, organizing it to really a business at this point, I would call it, because it's more than just posting a few photos every day. How do you kind of organize it all? I know it's a very large question, right? But like, how do you say like, okay, I have a Patreon, I need to create things for these tiers, right? I don't know if you're still doing printables or things like that too. You're generating that. You have the Discord and moderating, doing that, your YouTube videos, your Instagram, like a lot of these things. Like, how do you kind of organize that for yourself in a way that helps you really take, like we said before, a hobby into a business? And I guess, were you also doing that same level when you were working full time and doing this? Or is this like, nope, I'm a full time creator and I need a way to organize all these things?
Hi, my name's Jess and I don't sleep.
That's why I was messaging you at midnight your time asking if you could do a podcast.
Exactly. No, I think it's like, well, apart from being the kind of, building upon things, layers upon layers and stuff, it is very much about like just building in systems wherever possible.
Okay.
So anywhere that I can make something like, a process or whatever, be something that's a bit more streamlined and it's kind of like a one and done, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, the printables that I offer through my Patreon and through my YouTube memberships, because I need to remember that there's 2 of them now, and they're called The Team with a capital T. But anyways, so those printables and stuff, I make them in bulk. So when I make a new printable to kind of, put out to them. So let's say like the most recent one was something like a pentagonal tracker. So it's like a pentagon that's separated into however many segments for however many days of the month or whatever. Like rather than just making the one that's good for that month. So it's like, oh, it's February. Here's one with 28 days. And it's like, great. Now next month I need to make one with 31. And then the next month I need to make a 30 and like whatever. I'll just make them all at once. So it's like, you don't have that kind of like startup lag every time because you've just done it all in one kind of stint, which has made it a little easier. So anywhere that I can do something like that, I certainly do. So it's like, if I'm going to take pictures for Instagram, I'm not going to take 1 and then post it. I'm going to take 20 and then I'm going to move them all over to my computer. And then I'm going to do any of the photo editing that I need to do and put on the watermarks and all of that kind of stuff. So batching wherever possible, very helpful. As we said, don't sleep. Terrible suggestion. But yeah, it's one of those things that I know that if I want to keep doing the extent of what I'm doing at the moment, but then also kind of realize my vision. I have no vision, but if I had a vision, to realize that vision, I do need to think more about like who I could probably bring on board to help me more with it. Because at the moment, it's very much like one-man band, I'm playing the cymbals and the keyboard and the guitar with my foot or something. Which means that I find that although I'm doing all of these things, they don't necessarily all get all of my attention all the time. That kind of makes sense. So right now, Instagram's sitting there just like, come back and play with me. And Threads and I are over here like,
I was going to say, well, you weren't focused on Instagram. You're still in the metaverse. You're like messing with Threads. I actually haven't even like opened the app since I turned off the notifications. Honestly, it was like, I like turned it off and I forgot that it was there.
Nah, I think that the nice part about Threads, and I know it's like super, super new, is that the like bar for entry is so low, like
Mm,
so super low. You don't have to take pictures, you just type in a little caption. I think you've got up to like 500 characters or something. Very, very freeing. So it's a
mm,
really super easy way to share ideas.
mm.
So I'm interested to see how that grows, and I'm interested to see how I end up using it. At the moment, I'm kind of thinking something like maybe daily journal prompts or whatever,
Oh,
because that's
okay.
something I'm interested in, but
Not
we'll
just
see.
random thoughts throughout the day like Twitter. You're just
Yeah, having a Coke Zero, raise the brew.
check it off on my tracker. No.
Yeah.
To me, if you end up hiring someone to help you, you have officially made it. And that's like
Yeah, I know.
having
It feels like a really big next step.
it does. I
Like,
mean, because you literally have like a physical team. I mean, I know you call your crew your team and things like that, but like having a person as an employee that
yeah,
you are delegating things to, which I think will be a whole new adventure for you, right? Like to essentially, I'm assuming you probably do a lot of it. You might just not do a lot of like the crap you don't want to do, but
yeah.
that would be pretty amazing in there. So is that what's kind of the next thing for Jess and for JashiiCorrin in your mind?
Yeah.
What's the next big thing that you're kind of focused on or excited about?
So, well, currently we're still in the middle of, my map of crazy. So, like,
Amazing.
just trying to get through all of these videos first, because that's the first thing, for our bullet journal basics series, which has been like 3 years in the making, and I'm finally doing it. Oh
It's
my gosh!
amazing.
But I think after that, what I really want to do is make a course about goal setting. That's probably the biggest thing. So I've already kind of started planning out what that would look like, but it is, finish this project first, then do the next one. I'm really not good at that. I just want to do all the things all the time, all at once. But got to put the horse before the cart and all of that.
Yeah.
So probably that course, like we said, I'd like to get somebody on board to help me out. I just don't know how because I have issues with letting go. So we'll
Mm.
see.
It's pretty incredible to think about that just from a standpoint of, again, like I am in the same boat, like kind of like way behind, where it's like this is a hobby, you're working full time and you're doing that, and it's been a lot for me too to think about like it's not really a big deal. Sometimes I have these mini little panic attacks where it's like, I don't have a video to post on YouTube this week. And I usually post 2 videos a week. And then like not long ago, I had shared this in the mastermind where I was kind of like, I don't know if it was you or someone asked, like, Mark, are you going to do this full time? Like, is that the goal? And it's like, I don't think it is. And don't worry about it. Like it's not that big of a deal, but like do what's fun, do what's exciting, and like but at the same time pull the trigger on it, right? And like make those things happen. And it's super exciting. And I've loved getting to know you like personally as you've done that, but also just like seeing behind the scenes of what's going on is pretty incredible. I'm not as good as you are with that. Like when you were like, don't take a photo and post it. That's literally what I do. there's no bulky, there's no batching, there's no anything. It's like, because I'll take a bunch of pictures and I forgot that I took them. And then like, never come back to them again. And I'm like, oh, you tried to work ahead, but you didn't, and it's kind of where it's at. But to think about like how to sustain that in a way that like makes sense and doing that is pretty incredible. And then I don't think I'll ever do it personally, not because I can't, but I just don't think I don't know, it might not be in my card. But then making that jump into full time, I've personally, it's been exciting to watch you do it, because I feel like of the many people that I've seen do that, you're the person who is actually like, say stuck with it, but is kept inside of that lane. I've seen other people that have done it where it's like they start and then it feels different, but I feel like yours has always felt very consistent. Like when you made that jump between doing it as a hobby and then turning it into a business, where other people, it's like all of a sudden they have multi-level courses that you have to buy into because that's an income stream for them, right? Or like their posts feel different, their videos felt very different. It was like something changed when it happened. Like I personally feel like yours have gotten so much better because I mean your mind map that you have there by itself is pretty incredible to get into that. So I'm excited to see as it continues to grow and go in that. I'd be very interested about any other hobbies that pop out of this too. I mean, you're very focused in that. I know traveling is something that you do a bit of, but I don't know if you consider that a hobby or a necessity. But your vlogs and kind of those other things too, like content creation really is like a hobby because it's what you're doing for fun, but you also found a way to make a hobby into a moneymaker at the same time, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I value what you said about the idea that it feels like it stayed the same, and I kind of appreciate that because I see what you mean about sometimes when people go all in on YouTube or whatever else, or they're content creating, it almost like loses its soul. Like I
Hmm.
don't know if that's necessarily what I mean, but it becomes like every piece of content feels like a money grab in a
Hmm.
way, which I never want my content to feel like that, and I never want my community to feel like that I'm pressuring them into like buying something from me.
Hmm.
It's that idea of like I only really want to share things that I think are actually going to provide value to people.
Hmm.
So whether that be like, it'll make your life easier or it'll save you time or it's just like a step-by-step process to do something or whatever. And I
Or
think that
save you money. I think there's a big thing. I mean, you and I are affiliates with a number of different places. Archer and Olive is probably the big one, and that we have a very strong kinship there as
yeah,
well. But that's the same thing where people are like, "Oh, you're only telling me about this because you have to, or you want to make money." I'm like, I'm legitimately like excited about this product, and if you can save money by using a discount code, it like supports what I'm doing and all the time that I put into this as well. But that's not really why. Like, I just want to save people money. Like, I want to use someone else's code to save myself money. Who wants to buy anything
yeah,
full price? Not me.
exactly. We love savings. We don't want
Yeah.
to spend full
It
price.
lets us buy more stuff, right? Like, that's the whole idea.
I agree, 100%. Like, pretty much anywhere I go to shop online, I will go Google, does this place have a discount code? Because
Yeah.
I'm just like, paying full price for things. Ridiculous.
It's amazing. We had just got like a house PC. Like I'm a hardcore Mac user, but we needed like a not a Mac for everyone else in the house to use. And the other day I was buying something on there, and I forget I was using Edge or whatever comes with the PC now. And I went to go check out, and it automatically like added some type of discount to something. Like it wasn't like a download or like any of those other extensions. Like it just gave me money off, and I was like, oh, I didn't even have to look for it. This is pretty awesome. And I was like, ew, am I a PC like Edge user? Do I like this? I don't know, but I like saving the money. It was fantastic. As we wrap up, we didn't talk about it in the beginning of this, but like, where can people find you? I think it's important. Again, I feel like everyone should know you just because you're everywhere in the best way. I don't mean that like you're annoyingly everywhere,
Like a
but you are.
squid
Yeah,
with all
but
the
you're
tentacles.
not on TikTok, right? You're not doing any of that short
I'm
form stuff, are you?
I'm there. I'm
Okay.
there loosely. I go to TikTok to check my messages from my friend who sends me TikToks instead of reels. Ew. But like yeah, and you. Like
That's me.
literally it's you and it's Rachel and that's it.
Okay.
I Yeah, no, I am on TikTok, but really I'm mainly on like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, those places. JashiiCorrin. Like
Yep.
that is me in all the places.
All the places. Even the blog. Does that still
Even
exist or no? Did you let that die?
okay, I have a baby website. He's very cute, and by that I mean he's very new and needs a lot of work. But he eventually might have a blog. Emphasis on might because I don't like writing, but we will
Sure.
see.
You just sign up for something that has AI and then it just writes it for you. It's
Yeah,
pretty
that's right. Hey,
generic.
ChatGPT, write my blog post.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you hanging out. Thanks for being a part of this first one. I pretty amazing. Like I said, I wasn't quite sure how these are going to turn out because again, my initial vision of this was hobbies, but then also like one of my top podcast episodes is about bullet journaling. And I'm like, this just makes sense to talk about it. But I appreciate you sharing the background of like what's going on, a bit of that history there, and kind of like what's going on. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I super appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, because I'm excited to see where this goes. Because I love the Hobbyist Hangout. I like every time you have a new episode every 3 months, I'll watch it. Shots fired, pow pow pow. But no,
I
I'm
love
excited
it.
to see what happens.
I actually just on a funny note, I have to start doing these more because they just took away my monetization on my podcast because I haven't posted in 60 days.
Oh no!
I was like, has it been that long? It's a good thing I had another podcast just come out recently. No, but I really appreciate it. And I'll hopefully do more of these. So I'm just going to ask all my friends essentially to come and be on this podcast. I think it'd be
Oh,
super
sounds
fun.
good.
Awesome.
Invite me back for your 100th episode.
There we have a year later. We'll do
Yeah.
like the Billie Eilish thing she does. I forget which magazine she does, but every year she comes back and like does another thing. We'll see how is Jess a year from now after her 2-year anniversary of being a full-time content creator? Let's see
Yeah,
how it
she's back
looks.
at McDonald's. She quit this. Like,
Hey, can you get me a discount? I'm still
For
okay with
sure, for
that.
sure.
All right. Well, thanks so much. So there we go, our very first episode of having a guest on the Hobbyist Hangout podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast today. And if you want to continue to support this podcast, you can do so with a monthly donation by heading over to menwhobullet.com/podcast. All the details are on there. You can definitely check out this podcast on all the different platforms, including Spotify video and YouTube as well. I would just love to hear where you're coming from and where you're listening or watching this. So make sure you leave a comment and rating and review as well on your favorite podcast platform of choice. I'll chat with you next time as we have more guests and more topics here on the Hobbyist Hangout podcast.